Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to see so many people, so welcome. It's a delight to welcome Bob Binnie here to speak to us this evening. Bob is the Scottish Beekeeping Association's touring speaker for this year, and we're very fortunate to have him, and we're eagerly awaiting his talk. So this venue is supported not only by the Edinburgh and Midlothian Beekeeping Association, but also the East of Scotland Association, New Battle, and also West Linton Beekeeping Association. So 4 colonies all under one roof, and not a crossword between them.
Not so far.
So Bob's going to speak to us this evening on the chemistry behind feeding bees, and we're very much looking forward to your talk. So, Bob,
thank you. First, I want to say I really appreciate the invitation to be here. My wife Suzette and I have been here for over a week. We've been all over the country. We've seen some wonderful places, and we've met a lot of very wonderful people. I must say that I am very impressed with the demeanor of the Scottish people. I was a bit surprised, honestly. Every place we go, the people are very polite, very helpful, very supportive, very sympathetic of my bad driving on the left. And it's just been a great experience. It's been a big adventure. I wish we could stay longer, honestly, now that we've been here for a while. I wish I had just a few more days to see more sights. We're going to spend the day tomorrow seeing the city of Edinburgh, and then we'll be going home the next day very early in the morning. And it's been quite a treat. And once again, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me. It's been very special for us. So the talks I've done previous to this one all went very well. And so that has, well, they did. The people were wonderful, good questions, and for some reason I spoke well, so you never know how it's going to go. You know, it could go either way. And so now I have a lot of pressure to end my speaking tour with a good experience here tonight, and I hope I do well. The presentation is initially about the science behind, or the chemistry behind, feeding bees, but at each event so far, I've spent about 15 minutes talking about my history, our connection with Scotland, which is a bit surprising, honestly, and the region I live in and its connection to Scotland, and it's a huge one. Some of you are going to be surprised what I'm about to share with you. We live in the southern Appalachian mountain range. It's also called the Blue Ridge Mountains in my region. This is a picture from a very high vantage point near where we live. If you were to look at the upper right-hand corner of this picture, you see the last set of ridges there, and then the one right in front of it. Our shop and our home is down between those ridges, so it could not be seen in this picture, but it's about 25 miles away the way the bee flies, in other words, a straight line. It's about 60 miles the way you drive, but it's only 25 miles straight away. Up in the left corner, you can see a little bit of civilization up there. It's called Franklin, North Carolina. We live in the very northeasterly tip of Georgia. Many people don't know that the state of Georgia actually has some mountains in that region, but we do, as you can see. And so some of my bee yards are in that region of Georgia, and there's some are just over the border into western North Carolina. And if I had to guess where the border is, it'd probably be somewhere in the middle of that picture. So my bees are in 2 states. Now, the interesting thing about this region is that in the mid-1700s, there was a tremendous Scottish immigration into this region. At one point, 90% of the white people in this region were Scottish. The town of Franklin, North Carolina actually has a museum honoring the Scottish people. And once a year, they have Scottish games in the region at a place called Grandfather Mountain, and it's a big deal. Not only do people come from this region, but people come from around the world to be a part of those Scottish games. So the Scottish people in this region is a big deal. I just want to impress that upon you. We had a civil war in our country. Some of you might be familiar with that back in the mid-1800s, forgive me. and there was a north and there was a south. This region was considered part of the south, and these Scottish people that lived in this region were mostly part of the southern, what we called the rebel army or the Confederate Army of the South. And the Northerners, you're going to love this, the Northerners did not like fighting these people. They really didn't. They were afraid of them. They called them fierce warriors. And it was the Scottish influence in this region that gained them that reputation. So I don't know where that comes from, but y'all have a reputation for being fierce 250 years ago. So very interesting. A lot of the last names in this region are Scottish last names, as is mine. Binnie is a Scottish name, of course. And many of the people that live here don't even know their ancestry. They just know that their last name seems to be a Scottish name, and they don't even know why. So this time period is so long ago that many people really don't have a memory of it unless they visit the museum or look in the books, which is what I did before I came here. I learned a lot of this by going and Googling it before we came here. I thought if I'm going to speak to these people, I probably should be at least sort of smart about what I'm talking about. Anyway, so that's a beautiful view. There was literature you can find online where the Scottish people that settled this region said it reminded them a little bit of their home in the Highlands. I guess now that I've been to the Highlands, I kind of see, it's not exactly the same, but I see why they would say it kind of reminded them of home. It can be quite rugged. It can be hard to find a good bee yard or apiary, I don't know what you would call it here, but to find good level ground where you can set up a yard of bees. And that, as a commercial beekeeper, that's been kind of a challenge for me. Anyway, so that's our history, that's the connection. I think it's kind of cool myself, and I wanted to share it with you. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about myself now and our facility, what I've been through in my career, and then after a little bit we'll move right on into the subject matter, which is the science behind feeding bees. So if you were down 25 miles out in that picture and you were driving north, that picture was looking south by, east by southeast. Now we're looking north into the same area. And if you're driving north on US Highway 441, when you see this sign, you know you're getting very close to my facility. If it was not a cloudy day, you'd see a lot of mountains in the distance, which were the mountains we were seeing in that previous picture. This is part of our facility right here. We have two buildings. This is the main one where we have our retail store, our honey processing facility, our bulk honey storage, and our website shipping department, and all of that is in this building. We have another building that's much like this to the left that you cannot see in the picture, which is our wood shop and where the beekeepers work out of. We don't like to have the beekeepers working out of the same building where we process honey because the beekeepers are messy. Bees are messy. We like to keep the bees themselves out of that building. I think you all probably know what I'm talking about. So it's big, it's two-story, and which you'll see in a picture coming up. Next picture is when you walk in the retail door all the way to the right end of the building. When you walk into the door and you turn right, this is what you see immediately to the right. At any given time, we'll have anywhere from 8 to 12 different types of honey in the store. And Gino, you just got 4 of them. I brought Gino some honey from America. And the sign in the middle with all the colored writing actually states where all these honeys are from. And they're all from the US. We don't purchase honey from outside of our country. It doesn't mean there isn't good honey outside of our country. It's just what I choose to do. I choose to sell domestic honey that's produced in America. And there's honey on that shelf from California. And I know some of you won't recognize all these states or regions, but there's honey from California, there's honey from Montana, there's honey from North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Michigan, New York State, North Carolina, of course, Georgia, Florida, at times Tennessee, and even in Mississippi occasionally. So this honey is from around our entire country. And it's a variety of flavors. It's always amazing to me when people come into the store and we have this array of honey tasters on the table for them to look at, and they just say, well, I didn't know there was a difference in honey, so I thought honey was honey, and that's all there was to it. Of course, we as beekeepers all know that every single nectar source has a unique makeup, the chemistry, the minerals, the nutrients, the the sugar profile can be different in all of these honeys. We have honeys that never crystallize because of their chemistry. We have honeys that crystallize seemingly overnight because they're so high in dextrose. Of course, the crystallization has to do with the level of dextrose content. I was told that heather honey does not crystallize quickly. Is that correct? You're nodding yes. That means the dextrose level is somewhat low. Canola honey probably crystallizes extremely quickly because the dextrose level is high. So we have all that going on in our store. Now, if you don't move an inch, but you just turn around and face your left, this is what you see in our store. This is 4 of our retail clerks. We have, at a given time, 4 to 6 in the building that will help customers. If you look down the right aisle down there, that's our beekeeping supply portion of our store. We have a fairly decent beekeeping supply. People come from 100 miles around us to buy supplies from us. And just recently, we've really worked on our website, so we're starting to ship a lot of supplies, you know, in the southeastern region, and actually even to the west coast. It's surprising where some of the equipment is being shipped. In our wood shop, we make some things that are unique to us. In other words, there are no other manufacturers in the country that make things exactly like we do. And of course, that occurs naturally. Every supplier has a little bit different flavor on things, and so do we. And some people are looking specifically for what we're carrying. I think that's why we're suddenly seeing product going all around the country. We've worked very, very hard to make this store feel good when you walk in the door. I like to use the term, and I don't know if it's used here or not, I want this place to feel warm and fuzzy when you walk in the door. And most customers feel that. It's very interesting to watch people come in the door that have never been there before, and they're almost startled. They look around, and we have shelves of honey collection. We have a lot of jars to put on a shelf on display from around the world and around the country at the upper level of the walls all around the building. And then, of course, it's very warm colors are all right. We really tried to be conscious of what makes people feel good when they walk in the door, and I think we pulled it off to a major extent. That's the bee supply portion that you saw in the earlier slide down the right. Of course, there's clothing, there's feeders, there's foundation and tools to the left, and extractors. About anything you'd need you could find in the store. So now we're going to talk about processing honey. I've realized that I guess I'm unique here. We go through a lot of honey. In our industry, we are titled a producer packer. That means that we are beekeepers and we produce honey, but we also buy honey from other beekeepers and pack it under our own label. And in the United States, we're considered a medium-sized packer. This number I'm going to tell you is going to sound pretty high, but in our country it's not real high. Last year we packaged 1,500,000 pounds of honey in this room right here. You can't really see everything in the room. There's a few tanks to the left that are hidden by the one in the foreground. And the room looks very, very clean. Well, it is very, very clean. We work very hard to keep this thing seriously clean. We have 27 employees, so that gives you a little picture of our facility. And as you look to the right side of the picture, you can see the white table in the background. That's just a rotating table that we put empty jars on, and it feeds the conveyor. And the jars come around down the conveyor, and they stop at a 4-headed pouring machine, pours 4 jars at a time, and then they continue on to a cap tightener where the cap gets cinched down. Then they continue on to an oven where it heats the cap so that the seal underneath will glue to the jar, heat seal, if that makes sense. The next thing in line would be a inkjet sprayer to put a lot code. No container leaves our building without a lot code on it, so we have traceability. And the traceability is serious. It goes all the way back to when honey's coming in the door, the back door on semi-trucks. We usually, I'd say 90% of the honey we purchase comes in as a semi-truck. Does that term make sense here, semi-truck? 65 to 70 drums, 55-gallon drums on a truck. So they get a sticker. It's all cataloged. It's all tested for moisture. And as it goes down this chain of events where it gets blended and mixed and put in the tanks, everywhere it goes it's cataloged, and we have measurable, they call it CCP points, which is critical control points. Coming in the door, that would be moisture. And then beyond that, it would be perhaps filtering, where we measure how much coarse material might be in it, and it's all measurable all along the way. And we get inspected by 3 very serious different entities of inspection, and there's a lot of work that goes into the cleanliness, but there's even more that goes into the documentation. I could stack my books up this high on this table of all the documentation of all this. We know where the product's going and where it came from and all of that stuff. The beekeepers we purchased from. Now, I learned at my first talk, the first night, I learned that this is something that is not commonly or perhaps never done in Scotland, and that is that all of our honey supers enter a hot, warm drying room before they go into the extracting room, which doesn't show up in these pictures. And I'll explain that process. In our area, it can get very warm in the summer, and it also gets extremely humid. In other words, the relative humidity percentage in the air can be quite high. And because honey is hygroscopic, it can collect or absorb moisture from the atmosphere beyond a certain relative humidity, but it can also lose moisture to the environment below a certain humidity, and that magic number lies between 50 and 60% humidity. Now, the brood nest in a colony, for instance, the bees know somehow they've got this figured out. So a brood nest in a colony generally runs between 50 and 60% humidity, so they're not losing or gaining water very much. And so we do what the books tell you not to do. We're kind of well known for doing that. And for newer beekeepers in the room, the books are just a stepping off point. It gives you the basics, but eventually you have to figure out all the little intricacies that work really well for you. And in this case, we actually don't wait till all of our honey supers are completely capped. We like to pull them off just before they're entirely capped, perhaps 2/3 capped, and the rest is on the verge of being capped. You can almost see that the bees are ready to cap it right now, because it's the on-capped portion that's going to lose moisture in this environment. That blue thing in the middle is a dehumidifier. It's a big one, it's an industrial one, and you can see the water just dribble out of that thing. It's sitting over a floor drain, and the little plastic hose runs continuously when it's running. When our extracting season starts, we turn that machine on, and we never turn it off until we're done. It could run for several months. Actually, our first crop might start coming off in June, and we're not done till the 1st of August, and that machine is never turned off. It will bring the relative humidity in the room down to an average of 20 to 30%. The room is warm, and then the fans in the ceiling blow very forcefully down through the stacks of supers, and the on-cap portion of the honey becomes very dry. And then when we extract the capped honey, which may be 18% moisture or something like that, we'll mix with the on-capped portion, which is now very dry, and we like to end up with something around 16%. Now the books will tell you, I've been shocking people all along the way. I didn't realize what I've learned. I have learned more here than I have taught, but let's put it that way. So it sounds like folks here in Scotland don't pay too much attention to the moisture. In my area, we have to pay very close attention to the moisture. When you're talking about processing honey, feeding bees, there's always an equation. The books don't explain this. You'll read a book and it might tell you that the magic number where honey won't ferment is 18.5 or 18.6 or something like that. That's a half-truth. They're leaving out a portion of the equation. Of course, it would include things like temperature and things like that, but it also includes the amount of spores of yeast that are in the honey. The lower the yeast spore content, the higher the percentage of water can be in the honey before it ferments. And if you have a very high yeast spore content, you might have honey ferment as low as 17.5% moisture. Ask me how I know that. I've learned that one the hard way. Several years ago, I bought a semi-load of honey out of Florida. It was cabbage palm honey. I know that would be a foreign term to you, but in Florida, cabbage palm, the plant cabbage palm is fairly widespread, and it's extremely high in yeast. And I was unaware of it at the time, and I had a friend down there that I'd been buying honey from for several years. Good, honest man, never steered me wrong. He said, Bob, I've just made a bunch of cabbage palm honey. The percentage of moisture is 17.5%. It tastes wonderful. It's very light. I said, okay, send me a sample. It was exactly what he said it was. So I said, I'll take the whole load. I said, but my warehouse is full. Can we just wait a month or two? Can you hold on to it? And then I'll send a truck a little later. And he said, no problem. And I started paying him for it. Well, 2 months later, when we got the honey into the warehouse, immediately before I opened any drum, I could see there was a problem because all the lids were convex. You could rap on them and they were hard like a cork, you know. And I thought, oh, okay, something's wrong here. And sure enough, when we started breaking the seals on the drums, they go, psh, you know, this honey's fermenting. And when we went to do moisture content testing, it actually was 17.5% moisture and the whole batch was fermenting. And then I had another friend from Florida send me some black mangrove honey at 19%. He warned me. My friend, these people are honest with me. I know it's coming usually. And he said, it's 19%, but you'll have no problem with it. You can blend it with your thicker honey. It's not going to ferment while it's sitting in your warehouse. And he's a good friend of mine, so I trusted him. Sorta. What's the term? Trust but verify. So there were 17 drums total in that load of other stuff, and I used all of them up very quickly to blend them with thicker honey so the moisture content would be satisfactory. And I left 3 aside for a long time, probably about 9 months, just to see what would happen. And 9 months later, they were showing no sign of fermentation at 19% moisture. Why? It's because it has to do with the yeast content in the honey. 10 spores per gram. Gram is the amount they usually use as a measurement. 10 spores per gram would be considered very low. 100 to 1,000 would be considered very high. So there is always, I can't say that enough, there is always an equation when it comes to processing honey, changes in a beehive, changes in everything. Perhaps there's an equation in everything in life, right? Anyway, this is our comb room, our drying room. We leave our supers in there for 3 to 4 days before they go into the extracting room. This is a portion of our warehouse. I like to say that we have to act like squirrels. In the summer and fall, we have to collect our nuts and store them away so we can make it through the winter before the next season comes along. So my buying season starts in June when I start buying honey from southern Georgia and Florida, which is very far south. They have honey crops as early as available for me to purchase as early as the 1st of May, and usually by the 1st of June we're bringing it into our warehouse, and then in late summer I'm done making deals. So we have to pile it in our warehouse. We have this building, and we have 2 other smaller buildings that are full of honey too. So it just kind of gives you a picture of what we go through. Most of it is stored in 55-gallon drums. If you look into the right-hand corner there, you can see a few 275-gallon totes. That is becoming more and more common in our country. The drums have their advantages and the totes have their advantages, but bigger beekeepers are liking the totes because every time you move a tote, you've just moved 5 drums. So it's easier to load on trucks. It's a little more difficult for me as a packer, but it all works and I'm happy to deal with either way. The next picture is a typical bee yard of ours, and as you can see, they're single-story deep Langstroth boxes. I prefer deeps for a brood nest, either 1 deep or 2 deeps. I actually prefer 2 deeps over a single deep, but sometimes we end up with singles because perhaps they were a late nucleus, and we built them up over summer in time for our sourwood flow, which occurs in July into August. And I didn't want to build them all the way to a double deep because filling that second deep takes a lot of assets that I'd rather go into the honey supers, quite frankly. And I'm willing to feed these colonies to get them heavy for winter. Here's another bee yard in the middle of summer. You can see many of them are double deep brood nest with a medium super on top. And that's my preferred way of running a colony, is a double deep if I have a choice. Something else I learned is that in Scotland, it's not very common for packages to be used. In America, that's very common. And when I peaked out in numbers about 12 years ago, we were selling 1,500 packages and 1,500 nucleus colonies a year with a handful of colonies. At that time, we were running very close to 3,000 colonies. And then it only took me a year or 2 to figure out that was a bit more than I needed to. I called it the spinning plate syndrome. I had a little bit more on my plate And if you see these comedians on stage that spin plates on a stage, and hopefully they're not crashing before they get back to the other side. Well, I figured at 3,000 colonies, I was in the spinning plate syndrome, having a hard time to get back to the beginning, get to start the whole process of management again. So we backed it on down to 2,000 to 2,200 for a while, for several years. And then every year since then, I've been downsizing. And this next summer, I expect to have between 1,000 and 1,200. That's part of my strategy of looking at the end game as I get older. First of all, I can't work like I used to. And then also I want to make my business more palatable for somebody to perhaps purchase in the near future. So I don't need lots and lots of bees, make it more financially palatable for somebody to take it over. And we sell a lot of packages. Because we're in Georgia, we're in a southern state. Even though we're at a high elevation and later than some of the southern areas of our country, we're still early enough to where we can produce packages in the spring, and beekeepers north of us can purchase them from us, and it's perfect timing for them. And we're getting close to the end of our business pictures. I threw this picture in just to talk a little bit about my past work that I do not do anymore, and that is migratory beekeeping. In my earlier days, I traveled a lot with the bees. This picture of this truck is sitting in northern Florida. They've just showed up in this region. I'll be spreading these colonies out for gallberry honey. This is a gallberry honey region. And they've just come in from California, pollinating almonds in California in the San Joaquin Valley. It's a 2,500 mile trip. That's a long haul for bees. The load is netted, and invariably I get the question, isn't that hard on the bees? And yes, it is. You'll lose 5 to 10% of your queens on this trip. The bees need kind of a settling down period for brood to hatch, and they kind of recoup and get back to normal. But it's a huge part of American beekeeping. I'll give you an example. In the San Joaquin Valley, there are 850,000 acres of almond trees, and the growers try to average 1.5 colonies per acre for pollination. I'll let you do the math. That's a heck of a lot of bees showing up in one region in late January through mid-February, and I don't do that anymore. That was a earlier part of my life, and I'm glad to say that all of my yards are within 30 miles of home right now. I do not migrate like that anymore. It was an adventure when I was young. I liked it. It was kind of hard on my wife a little bit because at times she was left alone for weeks at a time and I'd have to be somewhere else, but we got through it. This is the last personal slide. This is myself and the 2 people that work for me right now as beekeepers. This is Selena Brownlee, which is also a Scottish name, and John Land. And this summer we're going to hire one more person. A man's going to come in from Virginia to help me for the summer, and he'll leave in the fall, and it'll be 4 of us for the summer running this 1,000 to 1,200 colonies. Now, depending on the way we run bees in our area, it might take more people or less people depending on what you are doing, your management techniques, what you're trying to squeeze out of your bees. And we're going to have 4 people running 1,000 to 1,200 because we will be working them very aggressively this summer. We'll be trying to make a lot more bees. We'll be trying to squeeze every drop of honey out of them and keep the mites under control and try to do a very good job. And so this is the main part of my crew. John, I think, has been with me 6 years. I think Selena's been with me 3. Our turnover with our employees is not much. People like working for us in general. Every once in a while somebody comes into our midst that doesn't feel very comfortable, and they end up either being let go or they feel they need to go. But for the most part, our employees stick with us. One of our employees, the man that runs the warehouse, has been with us from the very first day we opened that facility. And now, the science behind feeding bees. So I know